Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kyle Hawthorne, and this is Rooted Doctrine. Today we are going to get into Matthew chapter 5. This is a huge chapter. It's the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and it's really split into like three different sections. The first is the Beatitudes. The second is where he talks about the disciples and contrasts them against the world and refers to them as salt and light. And then he gets into all these personal relational issues that are really core to some of the teachings that they understood from the Old Testament in an external way, but Jesus needed to internalize them and really make the motivation for them and the purity that they originated from clear to them. So let's go ahead and just dig in. It's a long chapter, and I'm going to try to keep this video around 10 minutes or so, but it will be a challenge. So starting in verse 1, Matthew writes, "When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.'" So I'm going to stop there, even though this next section really, I think, ties in well with this, and just say that I think this is something that someone told me that is an elder at our church, and I agree with it. I think Jesus was absolutely horrified at what he discovered when he learned about the Pharisaic view of the law and the standards that they were employing and placing upon the people. And it was like this stark contrast between these external qualities, this Pharisaic view, which I referred to as, man's standard, and these internal qualities that I like to refer to as the heavenly standard or Jesus's view. And these external qualities were all about depending on yourself, about boasting in the riches of your own virtue and personal righteousness. I mean, the Pharisees thought very highly of themselves. They didn't mourn in recognition of their need. They were proud. They were harsh. They had a critical spirit. They were like the people that are described in Jude as grumblers and fault finders. And there's no rest in this posture. There's no peace. I mean, it is a works-based righteousness and really a self-based righteousness. And that's one of the reasons I believe that they really weren't able to recognize Jesus, is because they really weren't looking for a savior. They thought they had already obtained their own righteousness, and so they didn't thirst for another, like it talks about in these Beatitudes. And so this whole first section to me is like a contrast against that way of thinking and against that kind of erroneous view of the law and all that God had taught them about themselves. The law was really, they took what was meant to bring humility. I mean, it was perfect, and it was illuminating the perfection of God, but it also was illuminating our utter inability to live up to that standard. So it illuminated just our own need. And so instead of humbling themselves, the Pharisees and the nation of Israel used it to produce pride in them. And so when you look at these, it's just all these internal qualities, all this kind of upside down thinking that I think would have been completely just new and authoritative and really completely turning their world upside down. This poor in spirit, having a poverty of arrogance, being truly humble and gentle, and being like a condition to enter the kingdom, having to rid ourselves of our pride. This would have been a very new idea for them. And also the kind of these last sections, being pure inwardly and not ceremonially, that would have been something that was completely a foreign concept to them. They were very concerned with ceremonial purity. But Jesus is talking about being pure in heart and being pure in our mind, in our emotions, in our will, being pure in our conscience even. And so while this probably brought great offense to those who were pride, I think it brought great hope to those who were in a humble position because of the yoke that had been placed upon them by the Judaic system that they were underneath, where, they were having to pay this exorbitant temple tax. They were having to, spend a lot of time and energy trying to calculate how many steps they were taking on a Sabbath. I mean, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were all about like trapping people. I mean, you see them trying to trap Jesus. And so to me, this would just really lift that yoke off of them. And Jesus will talk about in later chapters how his yoke is not burdensome, how it's light. And so yeah, let's move on to verse 13 now. Matthew says, Jesus spoke, and the words that he used are, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law, until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Right away, I think Jesus just sees into the immediate response and almost gets ahead of it here, where I think he's anticipating this teaching being interpreted as though he's trying to skirt the law or nullify the law. And, the Pharisees would have jumped all over that. And he's making it clear that he is not coming to abolish the law. This is not about avoiding God's instruction. This is about fulfilling it in himself, and also fulfilling it in this perfect, complete way that they absolutely missed. I mean, they took the law and made it all external, and the core, the root of the law comes out of this pure place. That's why Jesus talks about the loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That in and of itself is the completion or the fulfillment of all of the law. So he's getting to like the spirit of the law. He's drilling all the way down, but he's not nullifying it in any way. In fact, he makes a a very clear instruction that anybody who even attempts to nullify the law will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And he also refers to the disciples as salt and light. And I want you to notice that Jesus does not say that you should be salt. He doesn't talk about how this is something you should aspire to be or that you should work towards. He says this is what you are. He is speaking to the true identity of a believer. And so this isn't something that we have to work towards. It's something that upon receiving faith, that it is a part of who we are. When we have the Spirit of God inside us, we are salt. And so we're called to live like it. We're called to crucify our flesh, our old nature, and live according to that truth, our true identity. Retain the character of our true identity. Don't lose our purpose. And Jesus never says the salt stops being salt. It just stops functioning like salt. And so if we find ourselves in a position where we're no longer acting like salt, which is, bringing out the God flavors on this earth and bringing out the God flavors in life, then we're to abandon that counterfeit way of living. We're to trample on it. We're to crucify that flesh that, we drag with us. It's like this corpse that we drag with us through life. Colossians 3 says, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Romans 4:22-24 says, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind. So, I wanted to go into a lot of detail about the function of salt being partially to make things taste better, clearly, but also as a preservative. We don't have time for that now, but really look into that. Like, what are the characteristics of salt? What is its function? And the second description that he gives to the disciples is that they are a light and that they are designed to illuminate. I think all beauty and truth described in the Beatitudes will radiate out into the world around us to show others the righteous path, not just to draw others to themselves, which I think will just naturally happen if we have Christ living within us, but to draw them to the source of that light. So, going back to like being an agent of peace in the Beatitudes, we're to be agents of peace, not because we have our own peace to offer, but because we are representatives of the Prince of Peace. And so every one of these kingdom reflections, the Beatitudes are pointing towards, are designed to point people to Christ. So let's pick up in verse 21 here. It says, you have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court, and whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Therefore you are presenting your offering at the altar, therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar, and therefore remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law, while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you will not come out of there until you have paid up the last cent. Okay, we're going to stop here and kind of go through this section piece by piece. It's very interesting to me that Jesus starts with murder and ends with unreconciled relationships. I firmly believe at the core of every division that we experience in our life, a relational division, even division between us and God, or us and our peace, is introduced by Satan. And in the middle of this passage, so it starts with murder and ends with unreconciled relationships. In the very middle of it, he talks about our offerings to God. And Jesus makes this really startling statement that he basically doesn't even want our offerings until we are reconciled with one another. And first be reconciled to your brother. We know that unity is so important in the scriptures, that we are to maintain unity. We're not charged with creating unity. We are already unified by the Spirit, but we are charged with maintaining unity, maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. And so really at the core of humanity's design at creation, I believe, when God saw the man and said it is not good for man to be alone, and he fashioned a helper for the man, at the core of God's design and purpose for his church, when he implanted and embedded his Holy Spirit inside of us and therefore unified us all together in that spirit of love, at the core of that is our unification with one another. And Jesus makes this abundantly clear in his last prayer for the disciples before he's crucified. And he says this, he says, "The glory which you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, just as we are one, I and them, and you and me, that they may be perfected in unity, so that," this is key, the reason for our unity, "so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you have loved me." This has been the way of God's design since the beginning of creation. We are image bearers of a perfectly united triune God, and we are to reflect that unity within the church, within our brotherhood, within the community of believers that God places us in. And so why does Jesus here make it so clear that he doesn't even want our offerings until we are reconciled? And I firmly believe that it's because the spread of the gospel around us to the world is directly dependent on our relationship with one another. The relational health of the church is core to our ability to be effective in bringing salt and light to the people around us. And here in Matthew, Jesus is connecting the fracturing of this unity, the disruption of our relationships, with the sin of committing murder. It's really a sobering connection to think about, because if you think about really true murder, it's separation, it's destruction, and it's the inability to breathe life. Life has stopped. So if we can't bring life to the world in a way that's like, it's like spiritually bringing death, because it stops the spread of that life. So let's pick back up in verse 27, where Jesus again makes these comparisons, saying, "You've heard this, but I'm going to tell you that." And this is about adultery. He says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." So when Jesus talks about like taking something and trampling on it, or cutting out your eyes or cutting off your arm here, one of the parts of your body, and throwing it from you, he's not advocating for mutilating ourselves. This is just to demonstrate the utter importance of us doing everything in our power to flee from sin. If you're not able to navigate area that you go in your life, then you shouldn't be going there. If, you have an app on your phone that causes you to wander into dark areas, then you should delete it. If you have websites that you can't navigate and maintain your purity, then you should block those websites from your ability to even access them. There is lengths we should be willing to go in our life to prevent the things that will disrupt our relationship with God. And King David is a perfect example. This is a man after God's own heart. There's 42 kings in the Old Testament. Only one is described as a man after God's own heart. And Jesus focuses on the eyes here because that's how the path down an adulterous relationship starts. It starts with a glance. That's how it started with King David and Bathsheba. And we are to flee from this temptation. We're to throw it far from us. We're to eliminate even the possibility that we'll be exposed to something that we shouldn't see. Be like Joseph and run from Potiphar's wife when you feel yourself being pulled into something that is not of God. Okay, let's read the rest of the chapter here. In 31, Jesus continues and he says, "It was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the reason of unchastity, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is evil. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile with him, go 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Therefore, you are to be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Excuse me. Man, Matthew does go hard on the tax collectors, as he should, and probably as only he, as all the gospel writers, considering all the gospel writers, probably would be able to, being one himself. So instead of kind of zooming in on each one of these last passages, we're going way over on time. I'll just say that my prayer when I read these is for God to hold my conscience in his hand and to keep my conscience sensitive. Jesus was battling a lot of pride, a lot of hardness of heart, and I think he was really doing all he could to try to crack through that, try to peel it back and expose that sensitivity. I think it's easy to become desensitized to the internal desires that give birth to sin, to limit ourselves on how far we'll walk down the road. And the Pharisees fell into the same trap. Well, as long as I'm not committing adultery, as long as I'm not actually murdering someone. And we all have this kind of internal criteria that we say, well, as long as I just look, or, I'm not looking at these things that are super bad. They're just, it's a little suggestive, or just if there's anything that we no longer feel sensitive about, if we become spiritually stiff, it's just a dangerous place to be. I think it's a path down the Pharisaic model, in our anger, in our lust, in our unreconciled relationships, in our lack of love towards people, even that we disagree with. When it becomes normal to the point where it doesn't really bother us, the Bible talks about our spiritual nerves kind of being seared, our conscience being seared with a hot iron. And it's really like a deadening of our spiritual sensitivity. And so I think that's the breeding ground for pride. I think it's the breeding ground for arrogance, and it also, I think, it drives us towards isolation and a lack of compassion for the things of God and really the people around us. And so my prayer is that God would keep my heart sensitive to these things, and I would, at the very first indication of drifting towards these warnings that he has given to us, that I would just halt myself and come before God, kneel before him, and pray that this would not happen to me, that I wouldn't be focused on some terrible ending to this road, but I wouldn't even want to step foot and walk one step down it. And that's the last thing I'll say about this chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It went way over. I don't know how to keep these things short when there's so much to talk about, but I don't like to edit things down. I just I turn the camera on, I just roll with it. I try to keep it authentic. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. If you do, let me know, like the video, subscribe, give me a comment if there's something that you disagreed with, or you want to start some dialogue, and we'll see you next time. Thanks guys. Take care.